Welcome back to another video in the ESG series. In the last video, we discussed calculating Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon emissions. In this video, we're diving into the nuances of Scope 3 emissions. We'll explore the various categories, delve into the calculation methods, and uncover insights that will guide us toward a more sustainable future. Let's embark on this journey to understand how these emissions impact us and the steps we can take to manage them effectively. As a quick recap, let's quickly understand what greenhouse gas emissions are. These are gases that trap heat in our atmosphere, contributing to global warming and climate change. Now let's look at which key greenhouse gases contribute to global warming. Carbon dioxide takes the lead at 60%, followed by methane at 20%. Then we have nitrous dioxide and fluorinated gases coming in at 10% each. Understanding these contributors is crucial as we tackle climate change. Let's dive into the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, a globally recognized framework for measuring and managing emissions. Established in 1998, it brings together businesses, NGOs, and governments to create standardized tools and methodologies. The GHG Protocol aims to drive sustainable business decisions and enhance our understanding of carbon footprints. Here we have the key standards and guidelines of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. These standards help in quantifying emissions reductions, reporting land use, assessing environmental impacts, measuring projects, and designing accounting programs. They're essential tools for businesses, governments, and policymakers in making informed, sustainable choices. The purpose of the Scope 3 standard centers on the GHG Protocol's corporate value chain accounting and reporting standard. It focuses on indirect emissions across a company's value chain. With a comprehensive approach, strategic insights, and transparency, it enables effective greenhouse gas management. This diagram illustrates the overview of GHG Protocol scopes and emissions across the entire value chain. We start with Scope 1, which covers direct emissions from owned sources. Scope 2 comprises indirect emissions from purchased electricity, heat, and steam. And Scope 3, the focus of our discussion, includes all other indirect emissions that occur in a company's value chain, both upstream and downstream. This comprehensive view is vital for understanding and reducing a company's total carbon footprint. Let's explore why Scope 3 matters. The GHG Protocol Corporate Value Chain Standard targets those indirect emissions throughout a company's value chain. It helps in identifying high-impact areas, making informed decisions, and aligning efforts with global targets. By evaluating sustainable options and meeting international climate goals, businesses can drive real change. Scope 3 emissions highlight the environmental impact across a company's entire value chain, from suppliers to customers. They're crucial for building a strong reputation as an environmentally responsible and forward-thinking leader. By assessing the entire journey from raw material sourcing and production processes to product use and disposal, organizations can demonstrate comprehensive value chain sustainability. Why does Scope 3 matter? Net zero targets demand addressing all three emission scopes. Scope 3 often makes up the majority, so ignoring it undermines global climate efforts. Aligning with international standards, promoting innovation, and fostering stakeholder collaboration are essential for meaningful progress toward these targets. Let's examine the relationship between a Scope 3 greenhouse gas inventory and a product greenhouse gas inventory. Scope 3 covers upstream and downstream emissions from material acquisition to end of life. Meanwhile, product life cycle emissions focus on specific products. Together, they provide a holistic view of a company's environmental footprint, enabling targeted sustainability strategies. Now, let's shift our focus to business goals. Understanding and managing Scope 3 emissions can drive substantial business value. It's not just about compliance, it's about identifying risks, seizing opportunities, and setting strategic priorities that align with sustainability and profitability. Addressing Scope 3 emissions serves multiple business goals. It's about mitigating risks by analyzing greenhouse gas impacts and seizing opportunities through sustainable practices and new markets. This inventory also supports strategic decisions, influencing investments and procurement to enhance overall value chain management. Let's explore the business goals served by a Scope 3 greenhouse gas inventory. By identifying reduction opportunities, you can effectively set targets and track performance. Performance tracking allows for measuring emissions and reporting reductions. Hotspot identification enables you to pinpoint high emission areas and prioritize efforts. And finally, target setting ensures alignment with corporate goals, establishing specific targets for continuous improvement. Engaging value chain partners in greenhouse gas management is crucial. Collaborative efforts with suppliers and customers enhance stakeholder involvement. This partnership drives efficiency and cost savings by reducing energy use, lowering costs, and minimizing risks. Additionally, by promoting accountability and transparency, you can better manage emissions and improve supply chain efficiency, ultimately reducing material waste and resource usage. Enhancing stakeholder information and corporate reputation through public reporting is key. By engaging investors, customers, and civil society, you build transparency and credibility. Participating in government and NGO-led programs further enhances reputation and encourages greater accountability, driving long-term success and trust in your sustainability efforts. Let's delve into the types of risks and examples related to greenhouse gas management. Regulatory risks can increase operational costs due to compliance challenges. Product demand risks involve reduced demand for high-emission products. Reputational risks threaten brand image if negative media coverage ensues. Supply chain cost risks stem from higher costs passed on by suppliers. Lastly, litigation risks can create financial liabilities from legal challenges. Addressing these proactively strengthens your business resilience. Now let's explore the opportunities in greenhouse gas management. Improving stakeholder relations through transparency enhances trust and community support. Driving increased sales and customer loyalty can come from offering low-emission goods. By focusing on efficiency and cost savings, you can achieve operational improvements and lower expenses. Differentiating your company with documented emissions reductions sets you apart, while driving innovation opens new product and market opportunities. Let's dive into the Scope 3 categories overview. These categories help us understand where emissions originate across the value chain. We'll explore both upstream and downstream activities, providing insights into each category's unique impact and opportunities for reduction. This comprehensive overview will pave the way for strategic decisions and effective sustainability practices. Here's a breakdown of the time boundary for Scope 3 categories. As you can see, Scope 3 emissions can span past years, the reporting year, and extend into future years. Each category, from purchased goods and services to investments, has a specific time frame, highlighting areas for immediate action and long-term planning. Understanding these boundaries helps prioritize efforts and optimize your sustainability strategy. Let's take a closer look at the Scope 3 categories, divided into upstream and downstream activities. Upstream includes everything from purchased goods and services to fuel-related activities and employee commuting. Downstream covers distribution, processing of sold products, use and end-of-life treatment, and even investments. Each category presents unique challenges and opportunities, helping us build a comprehensive approach to reducing emissions across the entire value chain. Let's dive into Category 1, Purchased Goods and Services. This category covers upstream emissions from all inputs a company buys, including raw materials and services. To calculate emissions, methods range from using supplier-specific data to applying industry averages. The challenge lies in obtaining accurate data, but by engaging suppliers and using proxies, companies can significantly improve data quality and make strides in reducing their carbon footprint. Category 2, Capital Goods, focuses on emissions related to the production of long-term assets like machinery and IT infrastructure. These emissions are generated across the entire life cycle of these goods. Calculating them involves using specific data for each type of asset or applying spend-based methods. By gathering data from suppliers and life cycle assessment databases, companies can accurately estimate these emissions. For instance, if a machine costs $100,000 with an emission factor of 50 kilograms of CO2 per $1,000, the result is 5,000 kilograms of CO2, emphasizing the importance of precise data for sustainable management. Category 3 focuses on fuel and energy-related activities not included in Scope 1 or 2. This includes emissions from fuel production, energy transport, and electricity-related transmission and distribution losses. The boundary covers cradle-to-gate emissions for fuels and energy. Calculating emissions involves multiplying the fuel quantity by the emission factor and accounting for transmission losses by using electricity consumed and a loss factor. For example, if electricity consumed is 1,000 kilowatt hours and transmission losses are 0.05 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour, this results in emissions of 50 kilograms of CO2. Understanding these nuances ensures more comprehensive emissions management. Category 4, upstream transportation and distribution, focuses on emissions from transporting goods purchased by the company. This includes third-party logistics and company-controlled distribution. Calculating these emissions can be distance-based using distance, mass, and emission factors, or based on data directly from transport providers. For example, transporting 10,000 kilograms of goods over 500 kilometers results in emissions of 500,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. This highlights the importance of optimizing logistics to reduce emissions effectively. Let's explore Category 5, waste generated in operations. This involves emissions from treating and disposing of a company's operational waste, typically managed by third-party facilities. The boundary includes emissions from processes like recycling and incineration, but excludes waste from sold products. You can calculate emissions using two methods: mass-based, which uses an emission factor per kilogram of waste, and waste type, which considers different materials. For instance, if 5,000 kilograms of waste is sent to a landfill with an emission factor of 0.5 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram, you have 2,500 kilograms of CO2 emissions. Efficient waste management can greatly reduce these emissions. Let's delve into Category 6, business travel. This covers emissions from employee travel for business purposes using third-party carriers like planes, trains, or cars. The boundary includes air, rail, and road travel not covered in Scope 1. Calculations are typically distance-based, using travel distances and mode-specific emission factors. For example, a 1,000-kilometer trip by airplane produces emissions of 0.25 kilograms of CO2 per kilometer traveled, resulting in 250 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. By choosing more sustainable travel options, companies can effectively reduce these emissions. Category 7 focuses on employee commuting. This involves emissions from employees traveling between home and work using various modes of transport. The boundary covers all transport methods used, including cars and public transit. Calculating these emissions can involve surveying employees to gather data on distance, frequency, and transport type. Alternatively, location-based averages can be used if surveys aren't available. For instance, in a company with 100 employees commuting 20 kilometers daily over 250 days, with an emission factor of 0.12 kilograms of CO2 per kilometer, emissions total 60,000 kilograms of CO2 per year. Encouraging sustainable commuting options can greatly lower these emissions. Category 8, upstream leased assets, focuses on emissions from assets leased by a company, like buildings or equipment. These aren't included in the lessor's Scope 1 and 2, but can range from energy consumption for heating and cooling to powering the leased space. The boundary covers emissions from the operation of the asset during the lease period. Calculations involve using energy consumption data and applying emission factors. For instance, if a leased office uses 5,000 kilowatt hours and has an emission factor of 0.4 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour, the result is 2,000 kilograms of CO2 annually. Streamlining energy use in leased spaces helps reduce these emissions. In Category 9, downstream transportation and distribution, we address emissions from transporting and storing sold goods. It covers emissions managed by third-party logistics after the goods leave the company's facilities. The boundary includes transportation to distributors, retailers, or end customers, and storage emissions. Calculations might use a distance-based method similar to upstream calculations or energy consumption methods for storage. For instance, transporting 8,000 kilograms of goods 700 kilometers by truck results in 672,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. Streamlining logistics can effectively reduce these emissions. Category 10 focuses on the processing of sold products. This includes emissions generated when downstream customers process products purchased from the reporting company. The boundary covers emissions from further processing by other companies, but excludes end-of-life treatment. For calculations, you multiply the mass of the product by the processing emission factor. For example, if 10,000 kilograms of product is processed with an emission factor of 0.3 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram, this results in 3,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. Understanding these stages helps companies engage with partners to drive down emissions effectively. Category 11. Use of sold products deals with emissions from the use of products sold by your company, including fuel consumed during use or energy use in appliances. The boundary includes all mandatory use phase emissions, like gas in vehicles and electricity in appliances. Exclusions are emissions from further processing and end-of-life treatment. To calculate, multiply the number of units sold by their annual consumption and use the specific emission factor. For example, selling 1,000 units of a device that consumes 200 kilowatt hours annually with an emission factor of 0.3 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour results in total emissions of 60,000 kilograms of CO2. This highlights the importance of designing energy-efficient products. Category 12, End-of-life treatment of sold products focuses on emissions from the disposal and treatment of products after their use. This includes processes like recycling, landfilling, and incineration. The boundary encompasses emissions from third-party waste management, excluding reuse or processing of products. To calculate, use the formula waste mass multiplied by disposal method emission factor. For instance, 5,000 kilograms of waste with an emission factor of 0.4 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram results in 2,000 kilograms of CO2 emissions. Efficient end-of-life strategies are crucial for minimizing environmental impact. Category 13, Downstream leased assets includes emissions from assets leased to other entities where the company acts as the lessor. These emissions aren't part of the lessor's Scope 1 and 2. The boundary covers leased asset emissions reported under Category 8. Calculations involve using energy consumption data and applying relevant emission factors. For example, if a leased office consumes 10,000 kilowatt hours with an emission factor of 0.3 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour, the total emissions are 3,000 kilograms of CO2 annually. Managing energy efficiently in leased spaces can significantly cut these emissions. Category 14. Franchises captures emissions from operations of franchises owned and run by third parties. These emissions can include energy use for heating or cooling and exclude direct franchise operations reported in Scope 1 and 2. The boundary focuses on indirect emissions from franchisees. Calculations use the formula emissions equal energy consumption times the emission factor. For example, if a franchise uses 5,000 kilowatt hours of electricity with an emission factor of 0.3 kilograms of CO2 per kilowatt hour, total emissions would be 1,500 kilograms of CO2 per year. Engaging with franchisees to optimize energy use is vital for reducing these emissions. Category 15 focuses on investments, which are emissions from equity investments, debt financing, or project financing. These emissions arise from the operations of affiliated businesses or projects. The boundary includes emissions from investments where your company has ownership or provides financing. The key point is proportional emissions based on the company's share. Exclusions involve investments not owned or financed by your company and not under your control. To calculate, you multiply total facility emissions by the equity share percentage. For example, if total emissions are 10,000 kilograms of CO2 per year and your share is 25%, your emissions are 2,500 kilograms of CO2 per year. Understanding this helps focus on sustainable investment strategies. And that wraps up our presentation on Scope 3 emissions. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you're ready to begin your own environmental, social, and governance journey, please reach out to us at the email provided. We're here to support you every step of the way.